of the Chinese economy is the pace of urbanization. Well, developed economies have an urbanization rate of around or above 80%. But when you look at China, the registered urban population is less than 40%. In other words, we have enormous potential and room to tap. And herein lies enormous business opportunities. The third key advantage of the Chinese economy is the expansion of the service sector. Normally, the service sector would account for over 70% in developed economies. And in China, it's just past the 50% mark. So in this area as well, there is enormous potential. China will surely continue to grow and develop, and we will provide many more business opportunities for the United States and other countries. And China and the United States will surely become long-term economic and trade partners. Moving on to China's diplomacy. Diplomacy is the extension of domestic affairs. We have already set out the 2 centenary goals. And we are uniting all the people in China in a common effort to realize the Chinese dream of national rejuvenation. And Chinese diplomacy will serve this overriding domestic objective. We want to do all we can to facilitate the accomplishment of our goal, and we want to create a more stable, enabling and friendly external environment for China's development. We want to harness more external resources for the benefit of China's development. I'm sure you're all impressed with China's development in recent years. You have every reason to be. In the last 3 years, President Xi Jinping built on the good tradition of China's diplomacy and articulated a whole series of new ideas and concepts. In our diplomacy, we are more proactive in defending China's legitimate and lawful national interests. We are more proactive in shouldering our due international responsibilities and obligations. And we are more proactive in working with other countries, particularly the United States, to pursue win-win interstate relations. At present and in the period to come, what are the main tasks for the Chinese diplomacy? You may have read a lot of material and commentary. Well, today I want to give you my understanding and interpretation of it. In my view, China's diplomacy will have 5 key tasks. Number 1, we want to help more countries and nations to better understand China's social system and development path. China is a member of the international community. We want to be more deeply integrated into the international community. At the same time, we will remain committed to socialism with distinct Chinese characteristics. For we believe this choice is in tune with China's national conditions and the people's needs. It has the strongest support from all sectors of Chinese society.
Socialism with Chinese characteristics in the simplest nature has its basic features as the following. We try our best to mobilize billions of people's initiative, and on that basis we are committed to common development as the general objective. That is to say, every Chinese, whether in towns or in countryside, in hardships or in good times, born from good families or not, despite all of these, every Chinese people can have hopes and expectations for the future and can realize their dreams through their hard efforts. This is a goal that we aim to realize. This is a general objective of what we mean by common prosperity. And it is because of this, the socialism with Chinese characteristics as a path has received the support from most people. And at the same time, one also needs to notice that in a country of 1.3 billion people, and in a country with quite strong and uneven development and disparity of development, realizing of modernization would require and must require a staunch force, a force with idealism, with a sense of responsibility, can devote and make dedicated efforts. And such a staunch force is the Communist Party of China, having a membership of 86 million at present. If 86 million party members can follow the requirements of the party constitution and take the national interests seriously and in a very important position and be pioneers in all fronts, then any kind of difficulties or challenges will not prevail over China. Any kind of difficulties will not hinder China's development. At the same time, and more importantly, the 86 million CPC members need a strong leadership core, and that core is the CPC Central Committee with General Secretary Xi Jinping, as the General Secretary, and under such a leadership, the massive ship of China is going forward in a steady way, and we will realize the two centenary goals. We have ample confidence about that. And at the same time, China's development is related to every Chinese well-being and happiness. It's also related to every other country's and every other people's happiness. It's very closely related with that. We very much hope that when we further integrate in the international community, we can receive more countries and more people's understanding. China will never export our social systems or development concepts, because we are always convinced that every country has the right to choose development paths which are compatible with its own national conditions. At the same time, we believe that on the basis of equality, we can conduct exchanges with each other over this. Now, you know that there is a book on the governance of China. It started publication in 2014, and it became very popular. Now, in more than 100 countries and regions, it was published. It had a publication number of more than 5 million copies. So Xi Jinping on the governance of China. We are confident that as China develops its exchanges with other countries in the world, there will be more countries and more people who understand and support the development path that China has chosen and the system that China has chosen, as well as the development models China has chosen. This is the number one task of China's diplomacy. And the second task is to firmly safeguard the international order and the international systems established since the victory of the Second World War, we will not start something else. Because in those years, China was the first country to sign on the Charter of the UN. China paid a cost of more than 35 million people's lives to have won the peace of the world. And the first thing for us is to staunchly safeguard the UN-centered international contemporary system, as well as the basic norms governing international relations represented by the Charter of the UN. In our view, the fact that so many disabilities are happening is because the principles and purposes of the UN Charter have not really been implemented and actualized. Non-interference in other domestic affairs and the peaceful settlement of disputes, these concepts have been thrown away and thrown aside. Therefore, an important task of China's diplomacy is to, through our own practice, to really implement the purposes and principles of the UN Charter in the concrete and specific practices of state-to-state exchanges. In our view, this is an international responsibility and obligation that China shoulders. And another thing for us to do is that we must defend a free and open world trade system. It is reliant upon trade and opening up that China has achieved rapid development. We are building an open-minded economy. We hope the world will do so. We are opposed to any kind of trade protectionism. And in the face of the current and the frequent regional and sub-regional FTA arrangements at this moment, we don't hope to see development of fragmentization. Rather, we hope that no matter what kind of arrangement, or TPP or SCP, they should become pathways leading to broader FTA system, and that point has already been affirmed at the declaration during the APEC summit held in Beijing. China and all other APEC members have expressed their commitment to such a principle. Not only do we need to defend an open and a free trade system, but we want to extend that further into the field of investment. Because, as you know, so far, there's not yet rules of investment in the world. Therefore, the G20 summit to be taking place in Hangzhou in China this year has an important agenda, which is for the G20 members to discuss jointly how to explore and form a global investment rules observed by all and open to all. And this is not something that can be achieved overnight, yet we want to get it started. Another point is that we would like also to defend and improve the current world economic and financial governance system. China has already deeply involved itself in the existing international financial and economic system. For example, the IMF reform proposal, which has been there for 5 years, has been adopted this year by the Congress at the United States. Our quota and voting has increased significantly, and China has also become a full member of the EBRD, the European Bank, and we will continue to play our role in the existing international financial and trade order. And at the same time, we do advocate and initiate the AIIB, the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. From the outset, some countries have anxieties or worries over that, and they are suspicious whether China is doing Monroe Doctrine of a nation type. But now it's very clear that from the very beginning, we embrace all other countries of the world to join the AIIB rather than limiting AIIB to the regions where China finds itself. Now, AIIB membership has half of them and more from countries outside of Asia. For the developed countries, other than the U.S., all other developed countries have joined, although that might imply a decrease of our equity in the AIIB. Still, we are willing to make it an open mechanism, and now there are some 40 countries that are waiting and queuing to join the AIIB. We will, together with all AIIB members, to turn the AIIB into an international standard, professional, and at the same time less of a bureaucracy, and an institution that really devotes itself to Asia's infrastructure development and address the financing bottlenecks in those aspects, and turn it and make it something which supplements and improves on the existing investment scheme. We are not starting something new in this connection. So that's my second point. That is, overall, we defend and we will defend the international system established after the victory of the Second World War. Let me come to the third task of China's diplomacy, that is to actively serve China's own development. By this point, and at this moment, the most important work to do is to work with more and more people and promote the development of the Belt and the Road Initiative. The Euro-Asian continent that China is located has, over the thousands of years, is full of the swords and fires and the bloods and the chaos. However, today, the commonality of all Euro-Asian countries are to develop industrialization, to accelerate industrialization and improve their capacity for development. And exactly because of this, China can provide them advanced equipment, mature technologies, as well as management, financing, and human resources training experiences. So this is a completely win-win and complementary initiative of the Belt and the Road Initiative. China and all other countries joining this initiative will be provided new prospects for development, and they will find new concepts for development. This is beneficial not only for China, but for all other countries. Now, more than 70 countries have expressed support and willingness to join in the building of the Belt and the Road Initiative. There are three pillars of the Belt and Road Initiative. The first is connectivity. Therefore, China is actively working together with other countries to clear the corridors of mutual connection. Not only we want to clear the Euro-Asian connectivity roads, but we want to build in a good way the pan-Asian railway networks. And we hope and we are willing to echo the aspirations of African countries and link the 54 African countries with high-speed railway in the future. Now, China has more than 18,000 kilometers of high-speed railway domestically, and we have this ability to work with other countries to achieve connectivity. The second pillar of the Belt and Road Initiative is the cooperation on production capacity. We've signed with more than 20 countries on the agreements over international cooperation on production capacity, and we hope that through this we can accelerate our respective industrialization process and realize a higher level of development, and also by doing this to cope with the challenges on all countries' economy. In fact, in the U.S., there's a reindustrialization plan. Europe is the same. Our production capacity cooperation plans are open. We are willing to open to any kinds of cooperation, including the tripartite cooperation on production capacity. China has advanced equipment and ample sources of funding. If we can combine that with other countries, for example, the U.S. core and critical parts or components, then such a kind of cooperation on production capacity can be advanced in a more effective way to the benefit of development of all countries' economy, and in that way contribute to the world's prosperity. And of course,
The third pillar of the Belt and Road Initiative is people-to-people and cultural exchange. There are diverse civilizations and cultures on the Eurasian continent. None is superior to the others. We hope in the process of pursuing the Belt and Road Initiative, these different civilizations can learn from each other in an inclusive way, contributing to human progress. The fourth task of China's diplomacy is to effectively protect China's ever-growing overseas interests. Like other major countries before us, China has come to a stage where more of our businesses and citizens are going abroad to develop themselves in other countries. Now, over 30,000 Chinese companies have set up shop in other countries. Several million Chinese are now working or living in other countries, and every year, non-financial outbound investment is rising rapidly. Last year, it reached $120 billion. Of course, if you count in financial investment, the figure would still be greater. And this figure is close to or may even be bigger than inbound investment into China. And it's growing rapidly every year. And every year, 120 million of our people travel abroad. This may be the largest migratory population in the world. So the Chinese government has a responsibility and an obligation to protect our overseas interests, to make sure the overseas Chinese institutions and personnel are well protected. But to be honest, we don't have the resources and capability to do that. So this is an urgent task for China's diplomacy. We must continue to enhance our ability to protect the lawful rights and interests of our companies and personnel. And we want to draw on international resources, working with other countries to better protect our ever-growing overseas interests, which are lawful and legitimate. The fifth task of China's diplomacy is to play a more active part in the settlement of international and regional issues. We are one of the permanent members of the UN Security Council, so we have a responsibility for maintaining international peace and stability. And in our view, the resolution of hotspots issues can create a more enabling environment for China's own development, besides being a good thing to the world. In Africa, we're helping to mediate the dispute between parties in South Sudan. In Asia, we are facilitating the peace talks in Afghanistan and the national reconciliation process in Myanmar. Of course, we have worked with the United States and others to arrive at the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action on the Iranian nuclear issue, and we are an active participant in the political settlement of the Syrian issue. We're in frequent communication with both the government and opposition in Syria. And I gather the issue that's foremost on your mind at this moment is the situation on the Korean Peninsula. I'm prepared for questions on this after my speech. But let me say this. First of all, we're against the development of nuclear weapons by the DPRK. We cannot allow nuclear weapons on the Korean Peninsula, either in the north or in the south, either developed indigenously or introduced from the outside. Should there be nuclear weapons on the Korean Peninsula, it would be detrimental to the interests of all parties. And it's not in the best security interests of the DPRK itself. So, the Korean Peninsula must be denuclearized. This is China's firm goal. Secondly, there can be no war or turbulence on the Korean Peninsula. Otherwise, there will be horrible consequences. How to achieve denuclearization? Ultimately, we have to go through negotiation, just as in the case of the Iranian nuclear issue, where 10 years of negotiation has produced the comprehensive agreement. I know Wendy Sherman is in the audience. She, on behalf of the American government, made an enormous contribution to the negotiation, and we admire her for her hard work. In the case of the Korean nuclear issue, the six-party talks has been stalled for 8 years, and in that period, we've seen multiple nuclear tests. There will be a new UN Security Council resolution entailing further actions to limit the development of nuclear missile technologies in the DPRK. Yet at the same time, we must not give up on peace talks, which provide the only viable solution to the nuclear issue. China is the chair of the six-party talks. We are fulfilling our responsibility and obligation, and we have put forward the idea of pursuing in dual tracks the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula and the replacement of the Korean armistice with a peace agreement. In other words, without denuclearization, there will not be a peace agreement. On the other hand, without a peace agreement and without addressing the legitimate concerns of the parties, including those of the DPRK, then denuclearizing cannot be achieved in a sustainable way. So we have to pursue both in parallel to achieve denuclearization and to address the concerns of the parties in a balanced way. We're prepared to work with the relevant parties to work out the pathway and steps for this dual-track approach. And thirdly, I must say China's legitimate national interests must be upheld in the process. And many of you may have in mind the deployment of the THAAD missile defense system. The United States is likely to deploy THAAD in the Republic of Korea. Of course, it's up to the AOK government to make a final decision. To some extent, it's their internal affair, and China does not interfere in the internal affairs of other countries. And we understand that in a very complex environment, the United States and the Republic of Korea want to ensure their own security. But I must point out that the X-band radar associated with the THAAD system has a radius that goes far beyond the Korean Peninsula and reaches into the interior of China. In other words, China's legitimate national security interests may be jeopardized or threatened. So, after the news broke that the US and the ROK may discuss the deployment of THAAD, we believe China's legitimate security concerns must be taken into account. And a convincing explanation must be provided to China. I don't think it's too much to ask. It's a reasonable position. I know you still have many questions on this issue, but let me now move to the next issue, the situation in the South China Sea. Let me say to you, the general situation there is stable. No commercial vessel has complained that its freedom of navigation has been threatened or jeopardized. None. Well, it's true that there is a dispute over some of the islands and reefs in the Nansha chain, or some might call the Spratlys. And 42 of China's islands and reefs, as part of the Spratlys, have been illegally taken by others. Still, China's position is we want to have a peaceful resolution of the issue through dialogue and negotiation in accordance with international law, including UNCLOS. This is a firm commitment from the Chinese government, which has ensured the general stability of the situation in the South China Sea. In the meantime, we're working with ASEAN countries to implement the DOC, and we're speeding up the COC consultation. China and ASEAN countries have every capability to maintain peace and stability in the South China Sea on our own. We have made quite a few proposals. First of all, the disputing parties, in accordance with the DOC, must peacefully resolve their disputes through negotiation. Article 4 of the DOC makes it clear that the dispute must be resolved by the directly concerned states. And the leaders of China and 10 ASEAN countries signed off on the DOC. So it should be a binding requirement. The Philippines has closed the door of dialogue with China. Still, China and the other ASEAN countries are doing our best to implement Article 4 of the DOC. Secondly, countries in the region, claimants or otherwise, who border the South China Sea must work together to maintain peace and stability in the South China Sea and to uphold the freedom of navigation in accordance with international law. And China will play its due role. Thirdly, countries from outside of the region, it is hoped, will support the resolution of the disputes through negotiation between the directly concerned parties, and will support the efforts of China and ASEAN to maintain peace and stability in the South China Sea. We hope outside countries can play a constructive role. Now, if all the 3 points are satisfied, then we can continue to maintain peace and stability in the South China Sea. And you needn't be too worried about it. Finally, let me speak about the China-US relationship. I think I may have spoken for half an hour already, and I know there is a Q&A session to follow. But before I do, I will talk about our relationship. This is the most important bilateral relationship in the world. It's a relationship between the world's largest developed country and its largest developing country. A good China-US relationship will benefit both nations and the world at large. However, if the relationship is mishandled, then we might fall into the so-called Thucydides trap. President Xi Jinping has suggested that the two countries work together to build a new model of major country relationship. The goal or vision is to build a win-win China-US relationship. I think that's the right way to go. And we're working with the United States in this direction to deepen our mutual understanding, to increase our dialogue, and to advance the process of building a new model of relations. And we hope this vision will also be shared by our two societies and enjoy ever more support from Chinese and American people.
Recently, there have been quite a lot of discussions on China-U.S. relations as well as coverages of the media. It seems that how come so many differences and contradictions have emerged in such a relationship? Yesterday, after my meeting with Secretary Kerry, when I met the press, I made it clear that both Secretary Kerry and I reaffirm that the common interests of our two countries far exceed our differences. Never mind that there are differences, we can address them through consultations. There is indeed one argument which merits our attention. Some friends in the States are worried. They view China as the real and the major adversary of the United States, and that one day China will replace the U.S. In fact, such a kind of argument has behind it a lack of strategic mistrust, strategic suspicion in the long term. And if such a strategic mutual mistrust develops, then it will make us concerned because smaller problems will grow into bigger ones. And if there are no problems, someone will try to pick some. On the other hand, if we can establish strategic mutual trust and remove misunderstanding and strengthen strategic cooperation, then we can, over any problems, find mutually acceptable solutions through consultations and discussions. Would China become the U.S. principal adversaries someday, or even replace the U.S.? I think this argument is a pseudo-argument. First of all, although China is the world's second biggest economy, in per capita terms, we are ranking behind the 80th place in the world. Human development is the basis for national development. That's why we say we remain to be a developing country, and we still must focus our efforts on development. And for a very long time to come, we must project our main energy on our own development. We will not compete with or against others, nor do we have the intention to replace others. Secondly, between China and the U.S., just as I said and chatted with old friends when I entered the door, China-U.S. relations are now in a period of mutual dependence. Almost all American businesses have developed themselves in China. More Chinese enterprises are entering the U.S., and in almost all states of America, there are Chinese companies creating job opportunities locally for America. Last year, China became the U.S. biggest trading partner with a trade volume of some 550 billion U.S. dollars, and such a number is still increasing every year. Mutual visits amounted to more than 4.75 million, and every day tens of thousands of visitors between the two countries are flying across the oceans. How could one imagine that these two countries will run into conflicts? If that happens, it will be a lose-lose situation. Only cooperation will lead to a win-win situation. If everyone can realize this, there's no reason that we should have confrontation. There's no reason that we should engage in zero-sum competition. There's every reason that we can cooperate, and we are entirely able to do that. In fact, there's a high complementarity between our two countries. We should constantly explore the potential and the new space for China-U.S. relations growth. Moreover, why do we think that we will not replace the U.S.? And the reason is simple, because we are not the U.S. China is China. China will not become another United States. In the blood and the veins of China, there is no veins of expansionism. There is no mentality or urge to be saviors of the world. Starting from 2,000 years ago, we built and built the Great Wall of China for self-defense. That is the special characteristics and a very typical expression of the features of the Chinese culture. And such features ingrained in the blood or the genes of China will continue. Even if in the future China would become stronger and more developed, and even maybe someday, very far away from now, because we have 1.3 billion people, the aggregate economy will become the world's biggest by some people's projection or estimates. But even if that day should come, China will still not be the United States. China will still be in the way of the Chinese people and in the mindset and thinking of the Oriental people, and take a even more harmonious and inclusive attitude to deal with other countries and to play our due role in international relations. And by that time, cooperation between China and the U.S. will go deeper and closer. In my view, what's most needed is the mutual understanding of each other. That is the main point I want to inform you, all of you, today. Thank you for your attention.